Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Innervoice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine and welcome to The Innervoice Show. This show about making a difference in your life so that you can create a free mind. Yes, it can happen. A free mind and a heart filled with love. And I know that that can happen toward creating a fulfilling life for yourself and everyone around you. I'll bring you the latest research in the realm of human sciences, and we'll talk to the experts in their field to bring you the jewel of their knowledge and wisdom. I'm going to have a workshop from my book, Life Reset, The Awareness Integration Path to Creating a Life You Want. And in the book, there is a series of exercises that you can complete on your own time. If you'd like to come to the workshop, it'll be May 5th and May 6th in Los Angeles area. So I would love to have you there, and we'll go through the book and the exercises there. The awareness integration model has been researched and published in many of the international publications, and we've done a lot of research on it that reduces depression, reduces anxiety, and raises self-esteem and self-efficacy. And so I brought that also into a workshop setting beside my office, and then the book as a self-help. So I'd love to have you there. I'd love to get your comments and converse with me. Just text me or call me or email me. You can reach me at foojanzeine@gmail.com. Go to my website, foojan.com, F as in Frank, OOJAN, and get my book or contact me, be a part of the social media or the podcast. If you'd like to consult with me, I have offices in Beverly Hills, Woodland Hills, and Irvine, and I do a lot of consultation online. So I love to be able to speak with you, hear from you, and see what it is that you want from the show. We'll be right back. So psychologists find the key to a thriving life. This research was published September 11, 2017 in Medical News Today. Recent research published in the Journal of European Psychologists Review, and the literature available on the concept of human thriving, and outlines the key elements that may lead to a thriving life. In certain situations, some individuals flourish and thrive, whereas others merely survive, sometimes giving up in the face of adversity. For centuries, the question of why human individuals react so differently to similar circumstances has preoccupied philosophers and psychologists alike. So Dr. Daniel Brown, sort of exercise scientist at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom, started reviewing existing literature on the topic and attempted to achieve the same. So Dr. Brown and his colleagues wanted to come up with all-encompassing concept of thriving that covers various population groups from babies to adult professionals. And they wanted to put forth a set of key principles that we can all apply if we wish to thrive in our daily lives. And finally, the third goal of the review is to identify gaps in the existing research and outline directions for the future research. Dr. Brown explains motivation for his study, saying part of the reason for lack of consensus is that research so far has been narrowly focused. So what does it mean to thrive? Dr. Brown believes that thriving is a word most people would be glad to hear themselves describe as, but which scientists have really not managed to classify or describe it appropriately. So he offers a simple explanation. Thriving appears to come down to an individual's experiencing a sense of development, of getting better at something and succeeding at mastering something. In the simplest term, what underpins it is feeling good about life and yourself and being good at something. So underpinning the simple definition is a list so-called enablers, or the things that would create that for you, or factors that increase our likelihood to thrive. Researchers know in order to thrive, not all of these factors are required, but a combination of some elements from both lists could lead to the thriving life. So those personal enablers include having a positive outlook on life, being religious or spiritual, having a proactive personality, being motivated, being committed to learning and expanding one's knowledge, being psychologically resilient, and being socially competent. That is surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues. That is an amazing life to have. So, and contextual enablers, not the personal, include being in a situation wherein the challenges are at an adequate level compared with one's capabilities, and having interpersonal relationships based on attachment and trust. Receiving support from one's family, colleagues, and employers is also important, and being given a high degree of autonomy and being trusted as a competent area key element. That would be amazing to have in life, and I think every one of us deserves to have it. We'll be right back with Dr. Habib Riazati, who's going to talk to us about thriving. So I'm excited to have Dr. Habib Riazati with me as my guest. He's a psychologist. He has a doctorate in clinical psychology. He used to be a scientist and a strategist at Boeing Company and worked on satellites. And then he became a psychologist, and he is a psychologist at the View High Hospital. He's also a founder and a program director of a nonprofit organization called the Human in the Making Foundation. And you can find him at www.humaninthemaking.org. I love that name. Welcome to my show, Dr. Riazati.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that.
Yes, you also have your own television show for the international Persian population, which you also talk about thriving and letting go of fundamentalism. And you are very, very active in the community in many sense. But I'm really intrigued about naming your organization, Human in the Making. So tell us a little bit about your organization.
Thank you for asking that question, because the term human in the making, in fact, was based on the belief that humans are developing constantly. Humans are the ones that are not static, rather dynamic, organic, and through motivation, they can become more evolved and more human. So in the making means potentially we have a lot of good qualities, and then through a good motivational factors, as you mentioned at the beginning of your program, we have to unravel those qualities that makes us more human. So this is why I chose in the making.
So you say becoming more human. What do you mean? What is your meaning of a human being or a human in a way that we are all thriving to become versus the concept of we're born into versus becoming?
See, the assumption that at least philosophical assumptions that I have is every one of us, when born, comes with some hidden treasures, hidden qualities, hidden attributes. But in order for those positive attributes to manifest themselves, there has to be some contributory factors which may include environmental factor, inheritance factor, the power of will that the person has, and all of these, when combined together, that jewel box, if you will, I consider a man or a woman to be like a jewel box, which in it they are all positive qualities. So to be human means to manifest those noble qualities that are hidden within us. And those noble qualities are those that, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning of your programs, is that it provides hope, it provides enabling and become enabler, and perhaps actualize your true self, which true self here means that self which does not feel inferior, does not feel superior, does not feel separated, but at the same time it sees itself as a universe which it is connected to. So to be human is a very broad concept, and we thrive, meaning that we day and night try to manifest those qualities that we become a part of a wider, more universal being. So that is a short answer that I can give you.
Dr. Riazati, what happens to the part of us as humans, which we see around the world, which also acts from greed, also acts from violence and hurting each other, and they might not necessarily be qualified as a noble quality, and it seems like that is also somehow part of humanity because it exists. It exists in every culture, in every socioeconomic, demographic. It is in female and male. It also exists in all sorts of things. So, as I hear you, is as if we've split off part of these qualities and said, we're going to give it higher moral value, and then we're going to call the higher moral value human, and then we're not going to call whatever that we call the lower moral value and behaviors that are hurtful to the self and the others, and we're going to kind of distinguish them and shove them aside. And although as a human being which we're born, we have all of it, but we're thriving and striving to go up into these higher moral, noble qualities that we call human. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. In fact, you pointed out one of the fundamental realities that exist in human nature, and that is we have to accept that we have some contradictory, opposite inclinations. That is to say that there is a will in us that can be used to do something positive or something negative. By positive, we mean that which makes us noble, happy, enlightened, and content. And by something which is opposite means that which gives us feelings of inadequacy, and then it impacts our relationship with our own selves and with others. So by thriving simply means gaining the awareness and ability and skills to fight with those forces that exist, if you will, within us, inwardly and outwardly, that may want to pull us away from that content reality that we want to achieve. So to become human, or to just concentrate on those noble qualities which each one of us has, it does not mean to deny that there are forces that are negative or perceived to be negative. Rather, if you will, consider a dialectical processes of thesis and antithesis, which actually create the environmental factors, all the environment that we are in it at any given time, but through the power of resiliency, through the power of looking at the good and deal with the evil, because evil is an absence of good. I don't believe that in the world there is something which can be called evil. Rather, we define evil, we define illness, we define disorder with comparison with the concept of order or health. So you see, my intention is that do not forget that there are opposite forces, but rather develop skills through the mental the abilities, through spiritual abilities, to cope with those opposite forces. Because if you don't, then and only then you feel helpless, you feel weak, and then those are the contributory factors, if you will, to other disorders, whether mental, spiritual, or otherwise.
So what I gain from what you're saying is that any type of behavior, character, or value system which comes into some sort of an action which takes a human being into their own destruction or other people's destruction, and if it takes them away from cohabiting with each other, from respect and creating a better world for everyone, then those we separate and call them not healthy, call them evil. We can name them whatever we want to name them, and then we take on the values and thoughts and emotions and behaviors and actions and virtues that not only takes the person into more of a healthy space mentally and physically and spiritually, and allows them to also cohabitate with other human being on the face of the earth, or other being, animals, or other being on the face of the earth, in the sense of health among all, like a win-win situation. Then we call that the more noble, higher quality, and then we somehow name, or we choose to name that human being.
Excellent. I think that you summarized it very adequately and holistically, because if you be realistic, unless I first have the understanding that I cannot have an adequate, satisfying, productive relationship with others outside of me, unless and until I first can strive towards creating a holistic relationship with different parts of my own self. That is to say that when my intention, which is hidden, my behavior, which is a manifestation of those hidden intentions, and my feelings and my thoughts, when they are not synchronizing, then that impacts our thriving towards being whole. Because unless we become whole, which, by the way, whole, holy, healthy, they are all come from the same Latin root of holus, which seems to mean that when we look at everything in relation to each other, but we do not ignore the parts, we consider the system, and also we do not consider the system to be the summation of the parts, rather greater than the parts or the summation of the parts. This is what in psychology sometimes is referred to as Gestalt. So that means we thrive, and the way we do it is first to create an inner unity, because the more that we create inner unity, then we are able to connect with a larger unity in the world. So this is how I define all of these becoming. This is why the moment that you think about being, then you feel limited, you feel static, you feel hopeless. But when you think in terms of becoming, then you feel enabled, you feel motivated. So basically, you will see everything that tells you you are greater than what you seem to be. Do you see what I mean? I hope that I'm clear on that.
What I'm hearing from you is like you have to be cohabitating. You learn how to cohabitate with yourself in a peaceful and a workable way before you can do this in an outside world. So the part of you, the part of us as a person who has the higher qualities, the resilience, the courage, the compassion, the love, and all of that, has to be able to cohabitate with our own side, which might be angry and fearful and has greed and has hate and has all of those other pieces, jealousy. So it has to be able to cohabitate and kind of nurture itself in a way and take care of its own. And then when that peaceful essence is there, then that also shows up in the cohabitation with the world, in the relationship that gets created in the world. The part that I also heard from you is, if I call it a being, like if I am static in this space of present moment and think that that is, then I might feel static or powerless about it. But if I look at the terms of becoming, which is always, it's not that I've arrived at one place, but I'm always becoming, I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm looking into the world and myself internally and externally to keep expanding myself to the next level, then that will be the thriving concept of looking into the future for betterment is the concept of thriving. And if we take that away from ourselves, then we get stagnated.
Exactly. And if you want to give a good example of it, is how some of the primary psychologists, such as Jung and Adler especially, defined one of the most common disorder in the world, which is depression, which according to most of the psychologists, and especially Adler and Maslow and many others, they taught that how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view the future, and what type of meaning do you create of yourself, others, and future, that contributes to the being optimistic or pessimistic, being passive, or being the person who looks at everything as a challenge to thrive. This is where resiliency comes in. So as you can see, this concept of becoming has many implications. One of the implications is that I am not defined with who I am right now, but what I am is just an introduction to what I can become more. So then the sky is a limit. Then I become better and better and better, more human and more human. Our expectation of ourselves become more realistic. We tend to see things exactly as they are, not the way that we like them to be. We do not exaggerate too much. We do not minimize things. So as you can see, this concept of thriving, which is our main point of discussion, involves being honest with yourself, being patient with yourself, being realistic with yourself. Do not shy from being wrong. It's okay to be wrong. We just learn from what you did, because this is a world of experience. You are not alone. Nobody judges you but your own self. So it has many, many wide implications, which when you want to summarize it in a one or two perhaps words that are very fundamental, is that you create your own self-image, your self-confidence, not the people outside of you. This is why you summarize it very well. If I first come to this unity with my own self, then I do not really fish for how other people think about me or feel about me. Of course it is important for me. If I feel that what I do harms somebody else, but I do not want to kill myself or live my entire life based on whether everybody else is pleased with me or not. As long as I have a fundamental principle, I know that I am doing things that are helpful to me and to the world, and these two are intrinsically related to each other, because whatever I do impacts the world, and whatever the world does impacts me, and how do I manage it? That will create a healthy personality, which then I call it the essence of thriving.
And for it to be also some reality check out there, because we know and we face every day in the news that there are people who are having a very, very high self-esteem, which does not necessarily relate to the reality of outside world. So they could, a narcissist can have their own illusion of their own self, where it doesn't contribute really to the world around them, but they think that, they have the highest value of whatever they've chosen. So all that you said has to also match the reality of outside, where there's some reality check where whatever delusion I have about myself or whatever I made of myself has to match some sort of a measurement tool, because we are, living in a herd and among others, and the cohabitation also takes the concept of me and others having the ability to interact together, and not just each one of us being in our own bubble, which we usually are. There's also the concept of self that you keep mentioning, and I wonder, what do you mean by the word self when you say it?
Very good question. I think that your comments and your questions are very, very important for our listeners to pay attention to, because you actually bring the concept to reality check. Do you know, before I go to the concept of self, I have to agree with you that unless our reality is contributing or harmonizing with the objective reality outside, it is not a reality. It can be an illusion. It can be a delusion. It can be a disorder. So we have to accept that at the minimum we are a social being. And therefore, I agree with you 100%, because this is an objective reality, that whatever we do, we have to ask ourselves, what is the impact of our thinking, feeling, behavior on others, and how others really impact us. What I meant by do not try to live with how others feel about you, I didn't mean that we should be careless about others' feedback.
Absolutely.
Rather, not to be so absorbed in our own self that we only fish for compliment, and we always become hurtful, deeply hurtful, and then resentful towards the people who may point out some of the character flaws that we have. In fact, the people who thrive are those that they listen to the critical analysis of themselves more than to those who always compliment them. Of course, as you know very well, and you have pointed out in your book, Resetting Your Life
Reset.
We have to understand that this actually is what we start to know what the self means. There is an individual self and there is a collective self, and these two go together. That is to say, by individual self, of course I use the word individual the way that perhaps Jung used it. IN is a negation, and individual means division. Individual means I am not divided. So, and this is the main part that we were talking about, that try to create a unity or harmony between different parts of your personality. Be real to your feelings. Be real to your thoughts. Because unless you are real and accept what you are, you cannot make a change. And how do you make a change? When you accept something which is a objective reality of what benefits you and the universe or the people who are in this universe. So as you can see, self even has been misunderstood, in my opinion. Some philosophies, some religions, even some psychologists have told us that the more you detach from yourself, the better off you are. If you die to yourself, you are better off you are. I, as a person who look at these things in a relational manner, science, psychology, spirituality, I say to myself, what does really this thing means? Because if I die to myself, what does that really mean? If I feel worthless, if I have no concept of self, if I do not pay attention to my own well-being, if I do not want to thrive towards excellence, then how can I actually appreciate the contributions of others? So, to solve this mystery, I did a lot of investigation towards the history of humanity and their contribution about the concept of self. The earliest work that I could find is a book called Gita, which is attributed to Krishna, which is mainly a philosophical work. And that book talks about individual self versus universal self. That itself, by dying, by detaching from yourself, simply means getting away from those qualities, from those feelings, those thoughts, those behaviors that disturb your balance and does not contribute to the healthy relationship with others. So as you can see, the concept of self has to be understood in a positive way, because the view that we have about our own self can contribute to depression, can contribute to personality disorders such as narcissism, which, as you know better than anybody else, narcissism is actually a result of viewing yourself to be inadequate. And then you are fighting to actually understand or discover your own self. Because the people who have a solid self versus shallow self, they are very content. They do not try to put anybody else down. They do not make a statement without investigation, research. They do not try to be always number one. They do not judge others. They do not have generalization statements. They do not see the world as a either or. All of these things, to me, has to do with the way a person thinks about his own reality, which we call, for the lack of better word, self. Sorry for the explanation. It was too long. I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. And when you said, you better than anybody knows about narcissists, I just want for our audience to know that I'm not one. That's not because I know it, but because I'm a therapist and I know it. So, although every one of us has a lot of narcissistic qualities, but I also got that the self, as we look at the narcissistic qualities, why do we even call someone a narcissist? Because their wounding has been done in an infant position. So I guess we all get born with just the world is mine, and that's all it is. The world goes around me, and that's who I am. And then somehow we have to build a healthy ego about who I am before I could even let it go and expand that concept of self to others. So there's like you said, there's a becoming that goes in the developmental stages of a human being as they grow up. To find themselves, and then after and finding themselves in their own world and the world of others toward them, and then the balance of the win-win situation of who am I and what works for me and what works for others. And I get that there's a individual self which usually looks at what my needs are. In the face of the universal self, that it looks at the bigger picture of what the world needs, and which I am in it, and not just me as one person who's separate than the world. And if I look at the world and make action toward a bigger world as if I'm in it, then it becomes more of a win-win situation for everyone, versus the part that it's just my selfishness and says I'm separate and I only need to take care of myself and I don't care about whatever happens to the rest of the world. All I need to do is a dog-eat-dog world, and I need to survive it, so I just need to take care of me and only me. And in that way, it seems like we get caught into the essence of the lower, as we called it, and we're just naming it for the sake of naming. It doesn't mean anything else except that the lower ground of just thinking of me versus others. And I'm hearing you say that the self is a potentiality of creation that is consistently just being, as a dynamic essence, keeps being created and recreated. And that it takes all of it, that each person has the self that is individual and the universal, and to have the ability to go from one to the other. And I know that the conversation of enlightenment is many times, as the spiritual world calls it, is that you forgo the personal self into being in the universal self alone. And that takes a little bit of a maturity where you have to find yourself before you can let it go. So if you never had it, then you would still have some sort of a mental illness. It seems like you got to obtain it and then choose to mature and let it go. And that's where I've heard a lot of the enlightenment, going from entitlement to enlightenment, pretty much.
Excellent. I think that you summarized it very, very scientifically and reality-based. See, the conclusion or implication of such a thinking is that I can go to college, I can go to university, I can get degree, I can graduate from the top universities. These are all external, and the people don't realize. The people who have a solid self, which as a result they have a healthy relationship with others, because then they attract the people who are like them. They are the people who external qualities, such as their knowledge, such as their wealth, such as their position, do not describe them. Rather, how they understand this knowledge, how they use this knowledge, how they use these positions, the power that they gain, in terms of making themselves a better human being, and also creating a more healthier relationship with others is what defines us. This is where we are emphasizing that it is not what happens to you, whether positive or negative, which really that much important. Of course, it is critical. But more critical, more important, is how do we answer to those forces, whether positive or negative. If, say, Foojan says something good about Habib, is it because Foojan inwardly has developed a positive quality in herself, which then enables her to say things which are real, or based on what she perceives to be real about somebody else, which then creates an environment for the hearer, Habib, to evolve, develop, and become those qualities that Foojan is describing. So as you can see, the implication of how do we think about ourselves has to do with many skills, which I think your book is one of the good reference to how to understand the issue of self. How do you get away from the distorted understanding of self, and then develop a good qualities that make you a noble self. And when you concentrate on the nobility of yourself and positive quality, then the negative qualities, they go by themselves. We do not need to concentrate on the negative. We only have to concentrate on the positive. And the way that we distinguish positive and negative is that whatever makes me more healthy, less anxious, more useful, more meaningful, then that is healthy. So I go towards that. And anything that creates impediment between me and other human beings, either creates superiority feelings or inferiority feelings, then I start to examine it, start to understand it, and develop skills, and be hopeful that I can become better.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on my show and allowing your time. I know that you're very busy and you took off from your hospital work to be with us and our audience. I want everybody to go into www.humaninthemaking.org website and read about the organization and the foundation, and how could they contact you? Can they, Dr. Riazati, can they contact you through the website if our audience
wants? They can contact me through the website, and they can contact me through my email. But I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your good show and given me the bounty to participate in your show. I learned a lot from you as well.
It's a pleasure always to have you on my show, and thank you for having me on your show many times. And I also, as well, learn a lot from you. I know that you have a lot of background in philosophical and psychological text and research, and it always comes through in an integrated space, and it upgrades my level of intelligence, so I really appreciate it. And
you are so kind.
thank you. And for all of you who have been listening with your heart, thank you. Thank you for your listening. Call me, text me, email me if you need to give comments about the show, or if you want to talk to some of our guests, or if you have ideas and topics that you want me to talk about. And also go to my website, foojan.com. Call me at 818-648-2140. Would love to hear from you. And until next week, which I have Dr. David Burns with me. Yes, the feeling good guy. Yes, the expert in cognitive behavioral. And create a wonderful, wonderful minute, day, year, month, every aspect of your life, you can create an amazing one. So take responsibility for that. Enjoy it. You deserve to be happy, and create happiness for yourself and everyone around you. Until next week, have an amazing time. Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.